Joining me now on the heels of yet another Trump arraignment is Marc Harris, the former senior investigative counsel for the House Select Committee on the January 6th attack. Marc, welcome to the show. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Marc, one might say that we learned some things, including a lot of timelines and details during the impeachment hearing. We learned much more through the January 6th committee that you were involved in, and we've got some more details now. But as somebody who is that intricately involved in this whole thing, you knew what you learned from the January 6th committee compared to what the impeachment knew. What do you know now that you didn't know? Is there anything in this indictment that is new to you?
There are a few tidbits. I would say most of the timeline that you laid out was known to the committee. In fact, we had a hearing that we referred to as the 182 minutes hearing, which was about what happened between the time that Trump left the stage and then he issued that 417 tweet. So there's a lot of the tick-tock there was known. There are some portions of the indictment that rely on facts that we didn't have access to. So, for example, there's a lot of emphasis on the former president's interactions with Vice President Pence. And that was something that we didn't have because Vice President Pence was not willing to talk to the select committee. So a lot of the details around that I thought were pretty interesting. I would add one thing to the timeline that you laid out. There was the 11:15, or a couple of things. There was an 11:15 a phone call that you referenced in the timeline. We knew about the call, but I thought that the indictment did a nice job of pointing out that immediately after that call, immediately after he got off the call with Vice President Pence, in which there was testimony, he called him a bad word, or he used the P word apparently, according to a witness to that call. Immediately after that call, the former president, revised his speech that he gave on the ellipse to put back in comments critical of Vice President Pence that had been taken out of the speech. That's a fairly significant fact that shows his intent to really bring pressure to bear on the vice president. What's your sense
of Mike Pence's role? We all know the public role he played. He had his counsel. The counsel decided to call J. Michael Luttig, the judge, who told him in no uncertain terms, you can't do this. The guy said, I need some cover, so Luttig decided to tweet it out. We know how that part happened, but once you know from Pence's own contemporaneous notes what was happening in his conversations with Donald Trump, what does that do to strengthen the argument, if at all?
Well, it sort of closes the loop. We had a lot of information from Vice President Pence's staff, his chief of staff, his general counsel, about the interactions. But the allegations in the indictment that describe, with, as you note, reference to Vice President Pence's contemporaneous notes, really sort of seal the deal in terms of the relentlessness of the pressure that former President Trump was putting on his vice president. The fact that his vice president was telling him repeatedly, I cannot do this. This is inappropriate. Your own lawyers are telling you it's inappropriate. And those sorts of details really add flavor to that sort of that dynamic, and I think are incredibly damning.
What's your sense of this idea? The recommendations that came out of your committee were different than the 4 counts in the indictment. Tell me how that's relevant. Obviously, a lot of attorneys and a lot of prosecutors say prosecutors want a case that they can prosecute that's relatively easy to understand. I'd say, having read this whole thing, it's relatively easy to understand.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there are differences. There were recommended charges by the Select Committee regarding aiding and abetting an insurrection. But I think the tone, the tenor, the themes of the indictment are directly in line with what you saw in the hearings by the Select Committee last summer. They've adopted, frankly, I think a lot of the path that we laid out. A lot of the evidence is in there. As I said, there's some nuggets that they're able to add that we didn't have access to. But I don't think, and I've seen members of the committee interviewed in the last several days, and I think the consensus seems to be that the members feel that this indictment is sort of faithful to the work that they did.